Good evening to you all and welcome, and thank you very much for coming to join us for the first of a series of dinners we plan to do. Our first guest is my great friend who is the legendary host of the Talk TV show about crime and also appears in programs such as Manhunt. What else have you been in, Peter? You've been an actor in many things also.
More commonly known as Rent-A-Gob. So I crop up here, there and everywhere talking about crime and policing.
And you began your career back in 1978, I believe, at Peckham Police Station.
Thank you for letting everybody know just how old I am.
78 is not too bad.
No, yeah, I joined as a young police cadet in 1977 and then went to Peckham as a PC in 1978. Witnessed very close quarters, too close for comfort, the Brixton riots of 1981. Decided then to sack being in uniform, become a detective in 1982, not so far from here, in the Royal Borough at Kensington Police Station. 1985, went to Scotland Yard, and then worked undercover for the best part of a detective thereafter, before eventually being medically retired in 1999.
And your undercover period was a very fascinating period because you were involved with drug gangs, the IRA, all sorts of people, and witness protection.
Yes.
Please tell us about that part of your story.
Well, when I went to the yard in 1985 as a young, fit and fearless 25-year-old, I thought I'd arrived, this is what I wanted to do. But of course, it was the explosion of cocaine onto the streets of Britain, the mid-1980s. Whereas previously it had been the preserve of the aristocracy, rock and roll, and various other people. Now it became an everyman drug. And very soon thereafter, on a Friday night, you would find chippies, sparkies, plasterers, painters and decorators hoovering up industrial quantities of cocaine, whereas previously they've never gone anywhere near it.
Well, I remember there was an article in the Times that said cocaine is now the middle class disease because it became so cheap.
And it did.
Was that the problem, or was it the gangs that were the problem?
No, the problem was, and the problem remains, the fact that it is an entirely unregulated industry. It's the fourth biggest industry in the world, illegal drugs. It's bigger than the textile industry, and I'm pleased to see we're all wearing clothes, right? It is bigger than the textile industry. It is huge. And whilst in the 80s we were being told by the government that we at Scotland Yard were on the side of the angels, we're fighting the war on drugs, coined in 1971 after Nixon's speech to the UN, where he called drugs public enemy number one. There we are, thinking we're on the side of the angels, and all we were doing was fighting an unwinnable war. The war on drugs cannot and will not ever be won, because it's a supply and demand industry, and the demand is so vast that the supply will never go away. The only possible way we will ever slow down the bloodshed, to stop the tide of teenage blood flowing through the streets of our cities and some of our towns, villages and hamlets, is by legalising and regulating the entire industry. But we do not have politicians who are courageous enough or inventive enough or sensible enough to put forward a framework whereby that can be done. And Matthew, before anybody accuses me of being what I'm not, yes, I've had an uncomfortably close relationship with drugs in my lifetime, but basically drug takers are tiresome, boring, tedious, and I would never condone or encourage anyone to take drugs ever.
But would you say that the problem here is politicians are only in office for a limited period and they want to get re-elected, so therefore they will not go after such a topic because it's not popular with the middle classes who elect them in this country.
Correct. And they also don't have the balls. Short-termism is the scourge of our political system. But what they don't realise is that Mrs. Miggins, who lives in her delightful Cotswold country cottage and is a wonderful lady, but she's probably read the Daily Mail all her life. And when she reads those headlines, it says, drugs are bad, drugs will kill you, drugs are terrible. Okay, in some circumstances they might kill you, but overwhelmingly they do not. Millions of people take drugs every night. They also raise decent children, hold down jobs and contribute by paying their taxes and being utterly, thoroughly likeable people. They just like a toot or a smoke at night. But under the current system, every gram they snort and every gram they smoke has to be bought from a criminal. So they simply fuel the global criminal industry. And until we get somebody with the foresight to say this is fundamentally wrong, Mrs. Miggins will continue to say when our grandson comes over on Sunday and has his third portion of apple crumble, custard and ice cream, he's just a growing boy. What she doesn't realise is that after main course, he's gone behind her greenhouse and smoked a huge great bifter, and he's got the munchies. That's why he wants 3 portions of apple crumble.
So that's your view on the drug industry. So we've done programs together about Madeleine McCann and Claudia Lawrence in the past. What do you believe about those kind of stories, missing people, about the victim shaming of Claudia Lawrence, for example?
Utterly appalling, and at the end of the day, I'm very glad that you use the word victim. Anything that I've done in my ongoing investigation into cases is all focused about victims, the people that are left behind, and they truly are the victims. With regards to Madeleine, there's a 3-year-old child who remains tragically unaccounted for. The undeniable truth of that story, and I've been to Praia de Luge on a number of occasions, I've sat at the table where the tappers ate, or whatever they're called, sat. I've walked that route from the apartment to that table time and time again, and what is undeniable is that they were out of earshot and out of sight, not only from Madeleine, but the twins. People forget the twins. If those circumstances had happened in the UK, it is absolutely beyond any kind of contention that a file would have been sent forward to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider prosecuting the parents for neglect.
And then if we think of the case of Ben Needham, the mother has always said to me, I am from an ordinary background. Why don't I get the support? Why was I vilified and these middle-class doctors were not charged with child neglect?
I've spent quite a bit of time in my life trying to figure out what makes headlines in one case and why does another case simply not. Now I'm too old to frigging give a shit, right? I'm going to just carry on enjoying myself. But it is, of course, a very, very important question. And Ben Needham's mother raises that point. I do know somebody that spent many, many months researching that case. Again, unfortunately, there are certain truths that cannot be said because people don't want them to be said. At the end of the day, I think the media, police, us, the public, need to maintain a victim focus. And once we all shift from devouring and enjoying the salacious, the gossipy, the titillating, and focus on victims, then we all might find ourselves in a better place.
Yes, well, I agree with you. The fact that everyone talks about the killer in the case, not the victim, that is such a terrible thing.
Indeed it is, which is why so much of my broadcasting always focuses on victims, those who really carry the life sentence. And if you've spent as much time as I have in the company of people who have lost loved ones to murder, you will understand, you will appreciate, and forgive me if you already have, you will appreciate that it is those people that carry the life sentence. The life sentence of loss, of heartache, of grieving, because you don't get over it. In my experience, by spending a lot of time with these people, they simply learn to cope. And some of the lamentable sentences that have been handed down in the past, I think we're getting a greater sense of balance these days, although we're not where I'd like it to be, is appalling. Victims first, foremost, always.
And you've always been very outspoken as a commentator, and you get a lot of criticism on social media.
No.
How do you deal with these woke people, the woke wazzocks, as I call them? How do you actually manage to put up with, you have a following of 66,000 on Twitter. Every day you must get a lot of people who write you good things, but a lot of nonsense also.
I fundamentally cope by not giving a shit.
So, okay, moving on. How do you see the policing justice system changing under Keir Starmer?
The criminal
do you think
justice
it's going to get
system,
worse or better?
The criminal justice system is broken in its entirety. Look at the front end, policing. How long have we got? Then let's go to the Crown Prosecution Service. Where do I begin? Then we go to the courts with their leaking roofs, rubbish IT, and not enough capacity to get the backlog of cases through. Then we go to our prisons. Again, I really don't need to insult your intelligence by telling you about the catastrophic situation with regards to our prison estate. And then we get to the probation service. So much of which, well, it was all entirely privatised at one point, a very dreadful mistake which was soon reversed. The entire criminal justice system is not fit for purpose. It could be fundamentally reformed. It needs fundamental reform, but politicians don't want to pay now for something that may benefit another government when they're not in power. And as long as we have this, once again, short-termism of our politicians, then nothing in the long term is going to get fundamentally better. And shame on all their houses because of that.
And given on Crime Suspects on Talk TV, you often talk about how there are good cops and bad cops. With the 600 cops under arrest, under investigation, do you think there are more good cops than bad cops, or do you think that there is a fundamental problem with the way the Metropolitan Police Service, for example, is run?
Yes and yes. Yes, there are far more good cops than bad cops. Unfortunately, these days, they're not sufficiently well trained. They don't know the law like they should do. And that is why we see some of these cringe-worthily embarrassing social media videos when irritating people film the police and they say, so under what power are you going to stop me filming? And then you see an officer go, under the policing law. There's no such frigging law. But of course, that's all been poo-pooed now by the Illuminati, by the highly educated senior police who pollute the corridors of power. Since 1997, when Blair said education, 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 and certain senior police officers said, we'll have a bit of that, all they've done is trot off and get letters after their name, because letters in front of their names wasn't good enough. And then what has happened, with a drip, 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 is that policing is now firmly in the grip of the world of academia. And if you don't believe me, go and Google any university, because so many of them have policing departments. I kid you not, okay? With doctors and professors of policing, whose most danger they've ever faced is getting a fucking paper cut. Okay? That is where we're at. They have a grip on policing like you would not believe. And as long as policing remains in the grip of academia, where frontline experience is poo-pooed upon, where senior officers get away from the rough and tumble of policing as quickly as they possibly can to climb that greasy pole of promotion, then nothing is going to change. Where management skills are valued over leadership skills, that is why policing is going down the pan.
So thank you very much for talking about those things, and I think now we will have dinner and then we can continue our discussion, and you can talk about something freely off camera that has also very importantly happened today that possibly is changing justice in this country.
And occasionally I'm funny, but I'm sorry that it's all been so deadly serious. Blame the interviewer, not the interviewee. And thank you. Now, when I had a son, my beloved Brad from a previous relationship.
Trinity Corporation.
I'm the luckiest man.
In the lighthouses. But then Alexis will come in. I miss going with the greedy lads.
He's having